From serene landscapes turned deadly to thrill-seeking gone wrong, some tourist experiences have ended in unimaginable tragedy. In this piece, we explore 5 of the worst deaths in the history of tourism, cases that left people with their jaws on the floor. In the quiet heart of the Swiss Alps, near the village of Saxbach, a scenic canyon carved by time became the stage for one of the darkest moments in the history of adventure tourism. On July 27, 1999, what began as a thrilling escapade turned into a nightmare that would haunt survivors and echo in the memories of families across continents. That day, a group of tourists from around the world, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, the UK, and Switzerland, gathered with anticipation. They were promised an unforgettable canyoning experience in the majestic Saxbach Gorge. As they suited up and entered the narrow canyon, excitement buzzed through the group. Few could have imagined that the beauty surrounding them would soon become deadly. Dark clouds rolled overhead, unnoticed or ignored. The guides, experienced and confident, reassured the group that the weather posed no threat. There were exits along the gorge, they said, and the adventure was safe. With those words, the descent began, jumping into pools of clear water, sliding down rock faces and floating through a paradise carved in stone. But nature had other plans. As the group ventured deeper, the atmosphere began to shift. A light rain turned into a downpour, and the once crystal waters transformed into a churning, muddy torrent. The current grew stronger. Water levels rose with frightening speed, creeping from ankles to knees in moments. The serenity of the canyon twisted into a sense of dread. Suddenly, a wall of water, silent until it struck, rushed through the gorge. A flash flood, born of the mountain's fury, smashed into the group without mercy. In an instant, joy turned into panic, and the fight for survival began. Some were swept away immediately, their bodies tossed like leaves in a storm. Others clung to rocks, gasping for air between waves. A few tried to help one another, but the force of the water was relentless. Logs and stones surged through the torrent, striking anything in their path. One survivor, a young Australian, found herself tumbling through the gorge, helpless against the fury of the flood. Thrown into a boulder, slammed by debris, she was battered and broken, but alive. Around her, the water carried the lifeless forms of friends and strangers alike. Escape seemed impossible. Every direction held danger. In that moment of chaos, a split-second decision had to be made. Stay and be crushed, or surrender to the current and hope it would spare her. She chose to let go. The river dragged her through narrow crevices and over hidden drops, tossing her like a rag doll. At one point, she was flung into the air and sent over a massive waterfall. Below, by sheer luck, a calm pool awaited. Exhausted, injured, and barely conscious, she crawled to the edge, her limbs failing her, her mind frayed by fear. The grass at the bank slipped through her fingers. Every motion was a struggle between life and death. Then, as if fate offered one final hand, another survivor appeared. Together, they reached the safety of the shore, aided by the very guide who had tried to save her earlier, just moments before the flood claimed so many. In total, 21 lives were lost that day, including 3 guides. 2 were never found. The aftermath sent shockwaves around the world. Families from distant countries flew to Switzerland for answers. A criminal investigation followed, exposing that the trip had gone ahead despite clear warnings of poor weather. 8 people associated with the tour operator were eventually found guilty of manslaughter through negligence. The scars ran deeper than any legal outcome could heal. For the Australian survivor, the flood changed everything. Physical injuries healed slowly, but the psychological toll lingered. Diagnosed with PTSD and struggling with survivor's guilt, she spent years confronting the trauma, haunted by the faces of those she'd lost, the sound of rushing water echoing in her mind long after the canyon had fallen silent. The island of Koh Tao, nestled in the Gulf of Thailand, is often described as paradise, a sanctuary of turquoise waters and palm-fringed beaches. But on the morning of September 15, 2014, that serenity was shattered. Beneath the beauty, a brutal story unfolded that would draw international attention, fuel controversy, and leave two families on opposite sides of the world drowning in grief. David Miller and Hannah Witheridge had never met before arriving on Koh Tao. Fate brought them to neighboring rooms at a modest beachfront complex known as Ocean View Bungalows. Like countless young backpackers before them, they came in search of sunshine, adventure, and a break from the pressures of everyday life. It should have been a trip filled with laughter and sunsets. Instead, it ended in horror. In the early hours of that fateful day, David and Hannah were last seen walking together on the sands of Sari Beach, the island's most popular strip. They had left a nearby bar, the warm island breeze still brushing the shore as they strolled under the stars. But what followed in the darkness was an act of unspeakable violence. Their bodies were discovered the next morning, close together, yet lifeless. Hannah, just 23, had been brutally assaulted and murdered. David, 24, was found nearby, his body bearing the marks of a savage beating before he was left to drown in the shallow surf. News of the double murder sent shockwaves through the island and beyond. Two promising lives, full of ambition and kindness, had been snatched away in a moment of cruelty. Hannah was a recent graduate pursuing a career in speech and language therapy, remembered by her family as a gentle soul with the power to touch many lives. David, an engineering student from Jersey, was known for his creativity, intelligence, and warmth. Both were adored by their families and communities, and their sudden deaths created a wound that would never truly heal. The grief of their loved ones soon gave way to another exhausting ordeal, the pursuit of justice. As Thai authorities scrambled to find those responsible, pressure mounted to produce answers. Just weeks later, two young men, Burmese migrant workers named Zaw Lin and Wai Phyo, were arrested and charged with the killings. Accused of premeditated murder, rape, theft, and being in the country illegally, the men became the focus of a case that stirred as much skepticism as outrage. From the beginning, the investigation was plagued by doubts. Claims surfaced that the suspects had been beaten and coerced into confessing. Rumors of mishandled evidence and political pressure swirled, casting shadows over the entire trial. Human rights groups called out flaws in the justice process, and growing numbers began to question whether the real killers had ever been caught. Despite these concerns, both the families made the difficult journey to Thailand, seeking truth, understanding, and perhaps a measure of closure. The Witheridge family, heartbroken yet determined, sat through parts of the trial in Koh Samui. At times, the grief was too much to bear, especially when graphic images of Hannah's body were shown in court. The Millers did the same, quietly honoring their son by visiting the very beach where his life had ended. They left behind tokens of remembrance, a sunflower-covered funeral program, a tribute to the bright life David had lived. The families remained mostly silent on the controversial aspects of the trial, but in a statement released later, the Witheridge family said they were confident in the Thai police's efforts, though many still viewed the verdicts with unease. Justice, in the legal sense, had been served. Yet, for many observers, the story left behind unanswered questions and a lingering sense of injustice. Today, Koh Tao still attracts travelers from across the globe, drawn by the same allure that once brought Hannah and David there. But beneath the sunlit waves and rustling palms, the memory of that tragic night lingers like a whispered warning that even paradise holds its secrets, and sometimes the darkness comes without reason. As the first light of dawn kissed the ancient city of Luxor, a group of tourists gathered with excitement and awe. The promise of a sunrise flight over the Valley of the Kings and the Nile River had drawn them from across the world. Britain, France, Hungary, Japan, Belgium, and Hong Kong. From the air, the desert stretched out in golden silence. It was a vision out of a dream. But for 19 of those passengers, that morning would not bring wonder. It would bring terror and death. The hot air balloon, one of many that filled the skies that morning, lifted off smoothly at first. Suspended over ruins steeped in history, passengers leaned over the edge, taking in the serenity below. The world, for a fleeting moment, felt weightless and still. Then something went terribly wrong. As the balloon began its descent around 7 a.m., a fire broke out, sudden and unrelenting. Witnesses nearby described seeing the flames lick up from the base of the balloon, a red glow against the morning light. In the chaos, the pilot and a British passenger jumped from the basket when it was just meters from the ground, their instinct to escape overriding all else. But the balloon, now unbalanced and unstable, shot upward once more. Flames engulfed the basket, fueled by leaking gas from the onboard cylinders. In the sky above the sugarcane fields west of Luxor, people began to leap from the burning gondola, some with hope, some out of sheer desperation. The balloon continued to rise, carrying its remaining passengers higher into the air before plummeting over 1,000 feet into the field below. The explosion, when it came, was deafening. One of the remaining gas canisters ignited upon impact, sending a final blast through the quiet countryside. Charred fragments of the balloon and debris were strewn across the crash site, a stark contrast to the stillness of the ancient land surrounding it. Of the 21 people aboard, only 2 survived. The Egyptian pilot burned over most of his body, and 1 British tourist. Among the dead were couples, friends, and solo travelers, all of whom had begun their day with joy. By mid-morning, the mood in Luxor had changed. Smiles turned to silence. Grief swept through the town like a sandstorm. Consular officials arrived in Luxor swiftly, providing aid and support to the injured and grieving. The British Foreign Office confirmed the deaths of 2 British nationals and 1 British resident. Their next of kin were notified, and messages of condolence poured in from officials, family members, and travel companies. Thomas Cook, one of the operators involved, promised full support to affected families, describing the event as a terrible tragedy. Behind the scenes, Egypt's tourism industry took another hit. Already staggering from years of political unrest, the crash brought fresh fears to a sector that relied heavily on international visitors. The Civil Aviation Minister, Wael El-Madawi, immediately suspended all hot air balloon operations and personally led the investigation into what became known as the deadliest ballooning disaster in history. Details began to emerge. Mohammed Youssef, a nearby pilot, recalled the horror. He had been airborne just 100 meters away, preparing to land, when the fire broke out. He believed a leak in one of the 4 gas cylinders caused the initial flames. When the pilot and 1 tourist jumped, it caused the balloon to jerk and ascend rapidly, forcing more heat into the canopy above. At about 100 feet, Youssef saw passengers jumping. Some never reached the ground alive. Others died upon impact, and those who stayed inside perished in the inferno that followed. The crash shook Luxor to its core. It cast a long shadow over a place known for its timeless beauty and sacred past. What should have been a gentle ride through the clouds became a descent into chaos. High above the Pacific, just off New Zealand's North Island, a plume of ash and gas spiraled into the morning sky. A stark warning from the Earth itself. Wakari, better known to many as White Island, had stirred again. The volcano, long feared and revered, was no longer silent. What began as a quiet rumble below the ocean surface turned into a sudden eruption, casting thick ash into the atmosphere and disrupting life across the region. Domestic flights were grounded, skies turned to smoky gray, and memories of a devastating tragedy came rushing back. Air New Zealand, the country's national carrier, quickly canceled 10 flights on Thursday, with volcanic ash creeping into air routes across several key airports. Visibility dropped. Pilots were told to steer clear. The ash, invisible at first glance, was laced with fine particles capable of grounding aircraft and irritating lungs. It floated like a veil over the North Island, a reminder that the Earth below remains restless. The eruption sent shockwaves, not just through the skies but deep into the national psyche. Wakari lies 50 kilometers off the North Island's eastern coast, about 200 kilometers from Auckland, New Zealand's bustling largest city. Its rugged steaming form has long intrigued visitors, a place of mystery and danger, adventure and awe. Once a prime stop on cruise itineraries, the island drew thousands annually, all eager to witness its raw beauty up close. But that allure came at a cost. In December 2019, the volcano unleashed a violent burst of ash and steam, while dozens of tourists were on the island. There was no time to flee. The ground opened. The sky turned black. 22 people lost their lives in what would become one of New Zealand's darkest tourism tragedies. Survivors were left with lifelong injuries and trauma. Rescue teams risked their own lives to retrieve the living and the lost from a place transformed into a living hell. Since that day, Wakari has been off limits. No more tour boats, no more guided walks across its alien landscape. Just silence, caution, and the long task of healing. Now, 4 years later, that silence has been broken. Scientists had been watching closely. Earlier this month, they noticed signs: minor tremors, gas emissions, and heat rising from deep within the island's core. Satellite images confirmed it. Minor eruptive activity was underway. GNS Science, the agency tasked with monitoring New Zealand's seismic activity, raised the volcanic alert level to 3 out of 5, signaling an increase in unrest. Still, many hoped it would pass without incident. But Wakari had other plans. The eruption, while not as explosive as 2019, was powerful enough to be seen from space. A thick column of ash and sulfurous gas billowed into the sky, drifting toward the mainland. Winds carried the remnants inland, where people in coastal towns reported smelling sulfur in the air. Rotten eggs, faint but unmistakable. Some felt irritation in their eyes and throats. Most symptoms were mild, but unsettling all the same. And yet, this may be just the beginning. Government scientists have warned that the current activity could last for weeks or even months. The volcano isn't done. Pressure continues to build beneath its surface, and while no full-scale eruption is predicted, the risk remains high. No one is taking chances. Not anymore. The island's Maori name, Wakari, means to make visible or to show, and true to its name, it has reminded everyone of the power that lies beneath New Zealand's seemingly calm shores. It is a land shaped by volcanoes and earthquakes, a country always balancing on the edge of natural wonder and natural disaster. In the harsh summer of 1993, the remote Kamar-Daban mountain range in eastern Siberia became the backdrop for one of the most chilling and baffling hiking disasters in recent memory. Echoing the eerie Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, 7 hikers embarked on what was meant to be a challenging but fulfilling expedition. What happened instead remains shrouded in mystery, filled with panic, death, and unanswered questions. The group was led by Lyudmila Korovina, a 41-year-old survivalist renowned for her skill, discipline, and deep connection to the Siberian wilderness. Raised in a village where outdoor survival was second nature, Lyudmila had mentored dozens of young hikers. Accompanying her were 6 of her students, ranging in age from 15 to 24. Each brought their own strengths to the journey. Yulia, the youngest, dreamed of studying biology and had a childlike awe for nature. Sergei, a 17-year-old athlete, brought endurance and energy. Denis, age 19, was a quiet photographer intent on capturing the beauty around them. Valentina, or Valya, 20, was deeply bonded to Lyudmila and known for her calm. Alexei, the eldest at 24, had an engineering background and was curious about the geology of the terrain. And finally, Sasha, a charismatic 21-year-old storyteller, kept spirits high with folklore and jokes. The Kamar-Daban Mountains, near the serene Lake Baikal, are a land of raw beauty and hidden danger. Rivers cutting through pine-covered cliffs, caves nestled in rock, and wildlife ranging from wolves to rare birds. It was a landscape that thrilled the adventurer but punished the unprepared. Still, with Lyudmila at the helm, the group was confident. They set out on August 2, 1993, alongside 2 other hiking groups in the area. One of these was led by Lyudmila's daughter, Natalia. The plan was for all groups to reunite by August 5th, but when Lyudmila's team failed to appear, Natalia assumed delays or a change in route. Nothing unusual. That changed on August 10th. a group of kayakers paddling along a river spotted a bloodied, disoriented young woman stumbling from the trees. It was Valya, the only survivor. Her story stunned authorities. According to Valya, their trek started well. Spirits were high, the weather was fair, and they even reached their summit ahead of schedule. But the descent brought trouble. A cold, punishing rain rolled in on August 4th, soaking gear and slowing progress. That evening, they made camp, expecting to meet Natalia's group the next day. Morning brought chaos. Sasha, who had been lagging behind, suddenly screamed and collapsed, blood pouring from his eyes and ears. As Lyudmila attempted to take control, other members began showing similar symptoms: bleeding, confusion, panic. Some ran, others dropped where they stood. Lyudmila, too, succumbed, crying out before collapsing. In the end, Valya and Dennis were left with the lifeless bodies of their friends. They tried to descend the mountain together, but Dennis soon died as well. Alone, Valya spent 4 harrowing days navigating the terrain, following power lines until she reached the river and salvation. Rescue helicopters launched a search. 2 weeks later, they located the rest of the group. The 2 hikers who had fled the scene were found dead from exposure. Autopsies revealed that all but Lyudmila had died from hypothermia. Lyudmila, heartbreakingly, had suffered a heart attack. Investigators were baffled. How could such a well-prepared group perish so quickly in summer conditions? Theories abounded: toxic plants or water, exposure to sudden cold winds, or even hallucinogenic mushrooms. Some suggested military tests gone wrong. Others whispered of strange atmospheric events or ancient spirits of the land. Adding to the mystery were reports of strange activity in the area over the years. Local folklore spoke of flickering lights in the sky, eerie sounds, and signs of past civilizations hidden in caves. Archaeologists had uncovered cryptic cave paintings depicting unknown symbols and figures, evidence of something forgotten by time. Despite thorough investigations, the cause of the Kamar Daban tragedy remains unsolved.